Hey everyone, I'm so excited about today's episode, but first want to let you know that this show is made possible by FortuneBuilders. I also want to take a minute to invite you guys to an amazing opportunity to learn from some of the top experts in the real estate industry about how to get started in real estate or scale an existing business to the next level. FortuneBuilders is hosting a one-day webinar to help you learn about real estate investing in today's market. So throughout the show, if you feel like you're ready to get started, go to FortuneBuildersShow.com to register. Again, that's FortuneBuildersShow.com to register. If you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you'll find a link right below the show so you can get there that way as well. And please remember that the content of this show and every show is for educational purposes only. Myself or our guests are not going to be providing any legal, financial, or professional advice. If we share specific results, they are attributed to an individual or a business, and we can't guarantee the results will happen for you, those earnings or the income will match those figures. The bottom line is there's always risk when investing in real estate. You can make a lot of money or you can lose a lot of money, and it's hard work. But that doesn't mean we can't have fun doing it. So let's get into today's episode.
From a team that has $1 billion in real estate investment experience. A show to help you learn the strategies and systems it takes to get started investing in real estate. This is the FortuneBuilders Real Estate Investing Show.
All right, hello everyone. You have your old pal JD Asajan here on the FortuneBuilders Real Estate Investing Show. Now, if you're looking around for Mr. Jeff Rukowski, he's actually not with us today. This is my first solo episode without interviewing another guest or having Jeff here alongside of me. And I have to be frank, I feel naked. Not like literally naked, but I feel alone. Jeff, where are you? Where's that flat top that people have come to appreciate so much? He'll be back with us soon, but we've got a special show planned today. This is actually a viewer or listener requested show. When we threw out the topics of what you want to learn more about, this came to the top of the list. And so we're excited today to talk about, and it's actually our word of the week. Hold on. God, that's good. Supply chain. Just sit with it. Let it marinate. Enjoy it. Let it just roll off your tongue or off of your ears or off of your eyes, depending on how you're watching or listening to this. It is today's word of the week. And what I'll give you the definition, like literally the definition off of the internet. Noun. If you didn't know. The sequence or processes involved in the production and distribution of a commodity. I mean, if that doesn't scream exciting show, I don't know what does. But the reality is it's a big problem in our real estate space, and we're going to talk about it today. Problems, solutions, what we're doing at CT Homes, how to think about it moving forward, because it's a real problem for us in the real estate space. So I'm excited to discuss it. I'm just excited to break it down. I'm just excited. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right, welcome back to the FortuneBuilders Real Estate Investing Show. Once again, JD Asajan here, riding, I was going to say shotgun, but that's not, I'm in the driver's seat today. I'm running the show today and excited to talk about supply chain issues, problems, and solutions. And for those of you that are newer to the real estate space, whether it's investing, buying and holding, renovating, etc., all of the above, what supply chain issues we're facing now, we're going to talk about those because you're going to have that problem in real estate. And those of you that are in the business already and doing transactions know that it's a real problem. And so I want to give you what the biggest problems we've been facing are and the things that we've been doing to try to solve those. There isn't one thing to do. I can't say, hey, ladies and gentlemen, take the green pill and all your supply chain issues will go away. I wish I could, but that's not possible right now. What I can do is give you some trial and error things that we've done at CT Homes LLC. Now, remember, we do 100 transactions every year in San Diego County at CT Homes. So we have anywhere between 25 to 40 rehab projects going on at one time. So we have a lot of experience with ordering material, having delays with material, figuring out where else to get material, then having delays with those material. And I'm going to give you the latest and greatest things that we've been doing to solve that. And really, like a lot of things, it's planning ahead. It's not waiting till the problem smacks you in the face. Because like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So you don't want to get punched in the face with supply chain issues. You want to deal with it ahead of time. And so that's what I'm going to give you the tools to do and think about. Some of these things you may already be doing, and you should continue to do them. And those of you, there's going to be a lot of things that you'll hear that you haven't thought about doing. So let's talk about what the issues are. Supply chain. Now, this is something that has always been in our industry, right? Delays on materials, but obviously if you back up to when COVID affected the world, that's when supply chain and the delay in certain goods and products and services and materials really got exacerbated. Now, I'm not going to say that this is going to be remaining forever, but it's going to be something that we have to deal with, certainly in the short term and in the intermediate and certainly thereafter, depending on certain goods and materials. Now, recently, Tim Cook, who's the CEO of Apple, had some statements to make, and he's been looked at, if you research and read, he's been looked at as a supply chain guru, in that he has figured out ways over the years to really help Apple in reducing their supply chain issues. And he made a mention very recently, that he sees by the second quarter of 2022, the supply chain issues really loosening up and getting more back to normal. Now, that remains to be seen. Tim Cook's a pretty smart gentleman, so I'm going to opt to listen to that, and we'll see what happens. But either way, let's talk about some things that we can do immediately and we can plan for now, and have in our tool belt, if you will. See how I use that reference, tool belt, talking about supply chain issues, in our tool belt or toolbox that we can use immediately. So some of the things, whether we're talking about residential or whether we're talking about commercial real estate, doesn't matter. The delay in goods, the delay in certain materials is real. And some of the big things that we've experienced delays happening the most on are right now appliances. For those of you that are renovating or planning on renovating or just wanting to get appliances for your own home, chances are there's going to be some delay. So I'm going to talk about what the problems are, or what we've seen the problems to be. And then I'll go over some of the solutions that we've been implementing, testing, and measuring, as we always do at CT Homes, and how you can think about solving some of these things. So appliances has really been the number one thing. I mean, maybe last year you might say it was lumber, either shortages or increased cost of material. But right now, appliances is at the top end and up at the top of the list of things that are creating the most delays. Then you have things like tile and flooring, whether you're talking about tile for walls or bathroom surrounds, or you're talking about tile for flooring or wood. Those kinds of materials we've seen significant increases in lead times and delays beyond what those extended lead times actually have been as well. And then lighting fixtures is up at the top of the list as well. Now, there's definitely going to be other things that you'll experience as you go to order that might not fall into those categories that I mentioned. For example, windows can be a delay as well. And sometimes that has been related recently or caused recently by certain products that are in a window, whether it's the glass or whether it's the metal or whether it's the plastic, they're having problems getting from overseas, and the materials sitting on shipping containers, in ports in a coastal town near you. But that's something that we have to deal with. So those are some of the problems and some of the specific materials and things within our real estate space that we've experienced to be the most impacted by this supply chain delay. Now, I do think that over the course of this year, we'll see improvements towards getting back to what normal was. And we'll see how far we get this year and how quick that happens. But nevertheless, if you're facing it now, I want to give you some things to do immediately. And if you are going to be facing it soon as you get into this business, and if you do get into this business now, if you're not already renovating or owning rentals, you will experience this. I want to give you some things to do right away. Now, some of these things might seem like, well, duh, JD, are you Captain Obvious here today on the Fortune Builders Real Estate Investing Show? Well, maybe, but if you implement them, they work. And then some things are ways to think about your business differently that can, save a lot of time and ultimately money when you're faced with these delays. So the first thing is ordering sooner. Okay, now that's a very obvious statement, but I'll give you some examples and I'll give you some ways to think about it. The number one thing that we can do, as I said a little bit earlier, is to plan ahead. And the best way that we can do that is to order material sooner. As an example, primarily up until maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, we would always order or have the contractors order the rough materials first, like the lumber and maybe some of the things that go behind the walls, etc. But what we're doing now is we're ordering the materials immediately when we know that we're going to be buying, a property that we're going to reposition, whether it's a single family, whether it's a multifamily, whether it's a retail asset, whatever it is, where we're going to need to order stuff that could be delayed. We're ordering that right away once we know we're locked and loaded. And for us at CT Homes, that's when we remove all of our contingencies on the buy side. So we're looking at 123 Main Street. It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in any town, USA, wherever you're listening or watching from. And you're going to renovate that home. And you're going to be putting in certain things, new appliances, new tile, new flooring, right? Those kinds of things. As soon as we're locked and loaded, 100% know that we're buying the property, even before we own it, we're ordering those materials. So for us, we'll buy anywhere between 2 to 5 homes a week and maybe sell the same depending on the time of the year, obviously the week out of the month. But we'll be ordering those appliances for those 2 to 5 homes immediately when we're signing off on our contingencies on the buy side. Now that does a couple of things. Obviously, it gives us the opportunity to get those materials here faster, appliances, flooring, right? Those kinds of lighting fixtures, some plumbing fixtures, getting those sooner. It also lets us know sooner if those materials are back ordered. And I'll talk about a process to help there as well. But if we're ordering even before we're buying, we actually closed on the home, but we know we're 100% committed, we've released all of our contingencies, it gives us the ability to get them sooner and also be notified sooner if they are going to be delayed. So that's really, I could stop the show there, and if you just implemented that, you'd be better off. But I'm obviously going to give you some other tools and some other things that we've been doing. But that's the number one thing that we can do now and moving forward, is to order material sooner. And also in that same conversation is be willing to pivot and don't be married to a certain kind of material. Meaning if you have to have Whirlpool stainless steel appliances in your next renovation, like the name Whirlpool just is orgasmic for you. I don't know why that would be the case, but if it was, and you're only stuck on the Whirlpool and those are delayed, well, you're going to find yourself in a jam. So be open to 3 or 4 different kinds of things that give you the same look and the same feel that the Whirlpool. I did use Whirlpool and orgasmic together in the same sentence, which maybe hasn't been done on I know hasn't been done on the podcast before. So, but it has now. So be willing to pivot, and when you're planning your next project, whether it's a hold, whether it's a renovation, quick turn, or whether, some variation of those, have a couple of different types of materials that you can interchange. Now, also with regards to ordering sooner and then being notified, obviously, when things might be delayed sooner, as you will be when you order sooner, is when you get that feedback, or you find out that those materials are delayed, or that type of material, or that type of fixture or that type of appliance is delayed, you want to, log that. And then I would look at what we do is we look at transitioning towards the materials that are more readily available. Okay. So it's a process of elimination. Of course, as supply chain frees up, we can go back to ordering later, I guess, if you will, as long as, we can get those materials faster. But right now we're ordering a lot sooner. Okay. The other thing that will help with that as well is broaden your horizons and explore different and more vendors. If you've been used to walking into Lowe's or walking into Home Depot or ordering from the local Ferguson's down the street, and that's the only place you like to go, it's comfortable, you know everyone, you got your process set up, it's going to benefit you to expand your database and expand your list of vendors where you can get materials from. And you should be doing that anyways. It's just like marketing or looking for contractors. You find a good contractor, you work together, and all of a sudden that good contractor becomes not good. They move away, they're hard to get a hold of, they get too busy, and then you got to start marketing again for contractors. It's the same thing with vendors. It's a good reminder, this scenario of supply chain issues and delays has been a very good reminder, and it should be for you as well, to expand your horizons in the world of vendors. So, find more places, local or beyond, online that you can get material faster. So if you've only gone into Lowe's in your marketplace, go next door to the Home Depot because there's probably one not far away. So start expanding the vendors that you work with, and don't just rely on the big box stores like I mentioned. You want to try to also look at some of the smaller mom and pop operations or the smaller national chains or local chains in your marketplace that have the kinds of materials that you order. So if you haven't been doing that, that's another very good use of time, and it will benefit you in the long term. Definitely in the short term, and absolutely in the long term as well, because in the short term, we're dealing with this exacerbated situation that will certainly free up, over time. But in the long term, having more resources to go to allows you to compare pricing, help reduce pricing. You can negotiate with those vendors. I don't like to necessarily pit a vendor against one another to have them price match necessarily, but it's always a good idea to the people that you buy material from or that your contractors are getting material from know that you're looking at all options that are out there. Okay, so expand out to different vendors and do that right away. These are things that we've been doing throughout the years, but we've definitely put more energy in our office and time blocked that more every week in our office to doing that. So even go so far as to setting goals around how many new vendors we're going to reach out to and starting those relationships or reestablishing relationships that we've had in the past. So number one thing I mentioned was ordering sooner and being willing to pivot and adjust around materials that may have, or you'll find out have longer lead times and delays. And then number two, which will help with number one, is to expand your horizons around the vendors that you're buying material from or that your contractors are buying material from. Again, so I would do right now is, set a goal in this next week, or when you get to your first project, set a goal of how many new vendors you're going to establish relationships with. Okay, so as a recap, right, we're ordering materials sooner on in the project, even before we own the property. And then number two, which will help with number one, is to expand your database and research, interview, walk into other vendors, other places that supply material that you're putting into your projects or that you've experienced delays with as you've been ordering or as your contractors has been ordering material. Okay. Number three, which actually is related, of course, they're all related, but number three related and will help with number two, which will help with number one, is block out time, spend more time expanding your the types of materials that you use. So in your scope of work, as an example, which a scope of work, the way I describe it, a scope of work is to a rehab what a screenplay is to a movie. So it's everything you want done in the home. So the contractor that's bidding it, the contractor that's doing the work, the homeowner that you're potentially selling the property to, right? When they look at the scope of work, it has everything there and they can envision what the property is going to look at. So when you're creating your scope of work, have 2, 3, 4 different kinds of materials that can be interchanged for that one tile or for that one kind of appliance. So starting to have a database of other materials. Now, in our network and in our education, we have our students use a scope of work library, which is a very detailed, over the last decade, CT Homes has been uploading scopes of work to that resource, and they pull from the exact scopes of work that we use. So start to create your database of those materials. And actually, this is a good point to talk about. For those of you that have been enjoying the podcast, want to get more information and more education around anything that we teach, whether it's the scope of work library or finding properties or raising money or dozens and dozens of other topics, go to FortuneBuildersShow.com and you can register for a class that's being taught by one of our top trainers. If you're watching the show, you can click on the link. For those of you that are driving or listening to it on some audio platform, you can type in FortuneBuildersShow.com to get more information about one of our online trainings where we dive deeper into really all the topics that we discuss here on the podcast. Okay, so we talked about, obviously, pre-ordering material, ordering material sooner. We talked about number 2, expanding your horizons and having a database of more vendors. And then number 3 is expanding the types of materials that you use, having a second and a third backup type of material that you can plug into the scope of work if needed. The challenges that we face if we're not doing the things that I've talked about to this point is a material gets delayed or an appliance gets delayed. You or your contractor are waiting. The vendor is saying, well, it's going to be in 2 weeks, or it's going to get delivered in 3 to 4 weeks or 5 to 6 weeks. And then that time turns around and the material's not there and they tell you you need more time. I mean, that time is valuable and that's costing you money when our business is to, buy, fix, and sell fast, or we're trying to renovate to get a renter in there. So the sooner you can interchange a material, the earlier you can order, the more vendors that you can go to will allow you to reduce that time dramatically. Again, as I started the show, I said I'd love to just give you the one thing that you can do to eliminate all your supply chain issues. It's just not possible. It's a combination of things that I've discussed to this point, and we'll add to before we wrap up our time together today, that will allow you to take that next 2 to 3 week delay and turn it into a 7-day delay or a no-day delay if you're planning ahead. Now, make no mistake, as you get into your next project or your first project, depending on where you are in your real estate career, you're going to have some delays. If you start to execute the things that we've already talked about and I've shared on this show to this point, you're going to be able to get through that project faster. Okay, so spend more time looking for materials that you feel are worthy and warranted of the next project that you're renovating, and start to log that information and have that that backup material that you don't have to wait around for. So and then number 4, which I've talked about a little bit already, but I'll add some more color to, is around the pre-ordering of materials. So we talked about ordering materials sooner, and that's probably the number one thing that you can do to reduce your issues on the supply chain side. But another challenge arises, which is why for many, many years until we needed to, we weren't ordering that soon, is what happens when and if, which it will happen, that material shows up and you're not ready for it, or it's too early on the job site, or you don't even own the house yet because you're ordering the material so far ahead of time so you can get to the project faster. And so pre-ordering material will create that scenario. So the way, and I'm not saying that we do this all the time, and depending on the size of your business, you may not need to, is we have to have a place to store material. Now, ideally, we would do that at the job site that we're applying or installing that material, but the job site may not be secure enough. Again, you may not order it yet. So one of the things that we've implemented over the last 30 to 60 days is renting a storage facility. You can decide where that is, how big you need. Depending on your business, you may not need to. If you're doing a lot of projects, it may make sense. And actually starting to warehouse, I shouldn't say warehouse because we're not renting a warehouse, but we're starting to store certain materials that we like to use all the time that have been historically, or I should say in the recent time frame, notorious for supply chain issues, and keeping those in one spot. Now, you might be listening or watching saying, well, if you're doing 25 to 40 projects at one time, why haven't you just been doing that anyways over the years? And the answer is we haven't needed to. It hasn't. Getting a material or getting an appliance or getting something that we've been installing a lot of in our projects hasn't created delays to the point where we couldn't get it right away or we couldn't get it the next day. But it has recently. So we started doing that and warehousing, or I should say storing certain materials. The things that we've been storing are certain appliance packages that we always like to use, certain types of material, whether it's color, shape, size, that we've experienced there being delays on. And those are really the most common things that we've been pre-ordering. Also, in some of our higher end projects, we will use an impact door, which, is a fancy way of describing like a special door, a multi-slider, or a long, wide door that is very impactful to the house. It creates a great feel in the home. Sometimes those have been like months, 5 to 6 months delayed. I mean, that's ridiculous. We can't wait 5 to 6 months and just sit and do nothing. So we'll order 3 or 4 of those, 5 of those ahead of time because they're standard sizes that we use in a lot of our projects. And we'll keep them, in a secure spot, in a storage warehouse, et cetera. What that also can do for you, if the volume of your business warrants it, is it can allow you to get price breaks too. If you're ordering more of something ahead of time, then you can negotiate better pricing. Now, for those of you that are watching or listening saying, well, I don't have a volume of projects that would really make sense for me to have a bunch of tiles sitting in a storage storage box, or a bunch of doors, or a bunch of appliances, then what I would suggest you look at doing when, the material isn't, you're not ready for it at the job site, or it's not ready to go in yet, is just find a secure place or create a secure place on the job site and store it there. If you don't own the home yet, then, you can put it in your garage. You can figure out a solution for that. So I'm not saying to run out and go ahead and buy 6 sets of appliances at Home Depot because they're sitting there right now if you don't need them. But for those of you that are renovating a lot of homes, or you have upcoming projects that you're going to be working on, it may make sense to have them, pre-ordered, sitting there, ready to go. You can negotiate better pricing as well around those materials. And that's what we've been doing. Again, why we haven't done it in the past is simply because we haven't needed to. Supply chain delays haven't created the scenario like they have over the last, 24 months or so, since we've really been, those of us that are ordering materials have been faced with this situation that, we can't get certain things, or the things that we want to get, there's no definitive time frame. Okay, so that's the other thing. Now, if you kind of look at all those things together, it takes time, right? It's planning. It's organizing, it's tracking, it's spending time each week, it's being proactive. It's not waiting to find out that something's going to be weeks or months delayed. It's, asking and then planning appropriately. Some of you might find yourself in a situation where, whether it's in the short term, intermediate, or potentially long term, you can create a position, part-time, full-time, around this activity. That's also what we've done at CT Homes as well. Again, the volume of our business dictates that we can warrant it. And so we have a team member that we've brought on where their job is to plan and order material ahead of time, track in real time where that material is at, or where that material isn't at if we don't know when it's going to be here. Then pivot and find option 2, option 3, option 4, option 5. Go online if there's nothing local, which sometimes we'll face, and go, the internet's created an opportunity where you can go, whether it's Amazon or search in Google, and try to find something online that they have that, they have a limited supply in some place, and you can get it delivered and keep your project moving forward. For those of you where your business doesn't necessarily warrant a full-time team member, you can very easily look at solving that either, of course, by yourself, or someone, that's already on your team, or using resources like virtual assistants. We talk and train a lot at Fortune Builders around using virtual assistants to leverage their time. It's more economical, get tasks and things done that aren't the highest and best use of our time. This is definitely one of those activities. It's not the best use of your time as the investor or business owner to be on the phone 3, 4, 5, 10 hours a week, calling around to every plumbing supply, store in your city, trying to find that one faucet that goes perfectly with the other materials that are going in the bathroom and the kitchen. But it's important, because if someone's not doing it, then every day that your project or your property isn't getting completed and sold, it's costing you money. So the way that I would suggest you solve it is on a short-term, part-time basis with a virtual assistant. Another way to look at that same thing, because this planning ahead does take time, but it's time well spent. Another way to think about it is to have interns, which is another version of, an assistant, if you will, where we have, and in the past currently have, college interns that come into our business, and they spend time getting real experience in a real estate business, and they can do these kinds of activities, pre-ordering material, adjusting the scope of work, calling around locally, or going online and researching other materials that will replace what we're looking for. So to recap, we talked about some things that we can do to pre-plan, which is really the single best thing that we can do to get ahead of supply chain issues. First and foremost is it's planning and ordering ahead of time, whatever it is that's being delayed in your marketplace. Okay, we talked about expanding the vendors that you get material from, locally or not locally, and using the internet to reach out to other resources. And then we talked about spending more dedicated time looking for alternative resources, materials is what I'm talking about, that can replace, that 1 or 2 types of tile that you really like to use, or you think you really want to use, or that appliance package. And then we talked about the time that it takes to do those things, and how to think about potentially solving that if you don't have the time, right? Someone's got to do it, and it's important to be done for your business if you want to eliminate or try to eliminate supply chain issues. And so the way that we've done it at CT Homes is we've actually brought in a, almost a full-time team member to do these things, go online, call other vendors, be updated in real time, or get updates in real time about materials that we were told are being delayed. Another way to solve it, for those of you that don't want to justify or can't justify, a full-time team member, is solve it with part-time help, whether that's a virtual assistant or a intern, free or paid intern, depending on how you want to look at that activity. The other thing that we haven't talked about that's a real situation now is pricing, and the changes in pricing as it relates to these supply chain issues. When demand goes up because supply is down, the other thing that also goes up is price. Okay, when something's harder to get, or some things are harder to get, pricing doesn't go down because the demand is so high, price goes up. And that's what we're facing in real estate right now with materials that are back ordered or hard to get. And again, there isn't one way to solve it, but it's planning ahead of time, putting in a buffer, or increasing the cost, or what you're estimating the cost of materials are when you plan the project. So I think it's, whether it's 10, 15, 20, 30%, depending on the material and the delays, and what those delays are creating in terms of price increasing, you want to plan ahead of time. So what we do at CT Homes is we add a little bit more to our overall contingency number, which is just a buffer that we underwrite into every project. That is that oops factor, right? Things that we can't see, things that are in the walls, things that we may or may not have to do because we don't know yet. We haven't opened those things up. We add to that number. And so I think it's a good idea to start doing that. For those of us that are renovating or planning projects, it's to add at least a 10% number on top of what we're already estimating as a contingency number. Depending on the material, it might increase even more than that. A way to get a handle on what that number looks like for your business is to track your KPIs, your key performance indicators. So when you buy a material one time, the next time you order it or the next time you buy it, track what has happened to that price of that material or that appliance or that thing that you're putting into the home. It's probably not going down. And then that difference, right, that gauge will give you a gauge of what you're going to be adjusting for over time. If you're pre-planning and if your business warrants that you can buy 5, 6, 7 of something or more because you're going to use it a lot, in the short term, intermediate, or maybe even long term, then you can use that buying power to drive pricing down as well. Okay. So, those are the things that we can do on the ordering supply chain side. And when it comes to the pricing side, same thing. It's pre-planning, it's tracking, it's knowing that, inflation's a real thing. Pricing, I wish I could go back to 1955 and buy, as much real estate as I could back then, because over time things go up. And that's the same thing with material and the types of goods and services that we put into our properties. So planning ahead for that kind of price increase and certainly that sort of delay will absolutely help as you get into your next project, as you get into your first project. All right, so those are obviously some of the important things that we can and should do on the planning side and pricing side. If you look at what happened last year with regards to lumber pricing, things spike up really high, and then ultimately, they come down over time. That's a derivative of the market that we're in. But if you are listening to this podcast where we talk about those kinds of things and you're planning and tracking, you can, and getting multiple bids, you can put in and build into your repair numbers those types of increases. With regards to the lumber pricing that went up really high last year and now it's started to creep its way down. I mean, if we can get it, we can pay more for it, we can plan for it. So the issue is sometimes not even having to pay more for something, it's the inability to even get that material. So, but that's where the pre-planning will come in. That's where the tracking of the numbers will come in. That's where the ordering ahead of time will come into play. And then ultimately, if you're finding yourself using things over and over again, or you do like that certain appliance package and it works really well in your marketplace for the types of homes that you're buying and holding or buying and renovating, you can order quantity or bulk and help hedge and kind of reduce some of the price increases or natural inflation that we experience anyways over time. So one more time to summarize, a lot of what we talk about getting ahead of supply chain issues immediately in the short term, intermediate, long term, wherever things move over the course of this next year has to do with planning ahead. It is a situation that you either have faced for those of you that are renovating or buying goods and materials, or you will face as you get to that activity. So it's ordering earlier, it's having alternative materials or appliances or specs that you can insert in to your project or your scope of work as soon as you recognize there's a delay that's going to affect your timeline. It's expanding your database and the amount of vendors that you can go to online or offline. If you don't know in your marketplace all the places that you can effectively walk in or get material like appliances as an example, you want to research that. Where are the Lowe's? Where are the Home Depots? Where are the Pacific Sales, which is like a local Southern California, San Diego supplier of many things, but also appliances. You want to find the places in your local market where they stock either always or sometimes the types of materials that you're using and develop a conversation with them. Start a line of credit. walk in and find out what they're out of or what they're not out of. And then go online too and find places that either have limited stock or maybe slightly damaged goods, but damaged in a way that you can still use them. So find those resources online. And then lastly, within all that, you have to you're going to create a system in your business to solve those problems with time. And so that's either going to be your time, which I can't say if you have the time in your business to do that. That's for you to decide, or leveraging someone else's time, whether it's a full or part-time person, virtual assistant, intern that's going to do those types of activities. Okay. Now, if you execute all those things that we've talked about on this show and you get those up and running, you'll start to recognize the improvement in the velocity of your next project or the projects that you're working on. It doesn't happen overnight. But if you're solving the problem when it smacks you in the face, it's inevitably going to take more time and cost you more money. The sooner you can get ahead of that, implement the things that we talked about, execute them in your business, the sooner you'll start to minimize the issues that the supply chain challenges that we all face are creating. And then, on this show, when you tune back into the Fortune Builders Real Estate Investing Show, as we experience changes, whether it's in the systems that I talked about on this show, or whether it's just in general, things that we're hearing, reading, seeing overall, nationally, globally with supply chain issues, we'll talk about them on this show, because I do feel that over the course of this year, we'll start to ease up in some of the bottlenecks that we've experienced with supply chain issues that affect our real estate industry. I don't have a crystal ball, but that's the general consensus, and I think that it'll happen. So get out there, implement the things that we talked about, stay plugged into what we're talking about on this show. Go to FortuneBuildersShow.com to get more information about future online trainings that we do, and just in general, stay plugged into what we teach and talk about here at Fortune Builders and CT Homes. Excited to see you on the next show. We'll have certainly Mr. Jeff Rukowski and his flat top, aka like Iceman from Top Gun, back with me, and that's a great movie if you haven't watched it in a while. When you watch Top Gun for the next time or the first time, notice that in almost every scene in that movie, the actors are glistening. I'm not making that up. It's filmed in San Diego. I live in San Diego. I've never glistened in San Diego living here, but in that movie, every single scene, the actors are glistening. That has nothing to do with supply chain issues. It's just a fun fact. Jeff will be with us on the next show, most likely, but thank you for tuning in. Thank you for plugging in, and we'll catch you on the next podcast.